This week on Back to the Movies, we're talking Lust Caution.
We're going back to the movies. 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 Hell.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Back to the Movies, the silver screen time machine where my co-host and I travel back to a specific year of cinema history and explore what made it special. This season, we're looking at the year 2007. I'm your host, Ben, and with me as always is my co-host, Nat McGee. Nat, how's it going?
Oh boy, it's going great. It's going great. It's spring, man. We're in the depths of spring. It's raining.
My allergies are going nuts. I didn't used to have allergies. I grew into them.
Really? Yeah, every once in a while I have a little sneeze and I'm like, is this COVID? But then I'm like, COVID, you don't sneeze. It's allergies. Hell yeah. So, I don't know.
It's pollen.
Getting old. Wow, where are we going with this?
What the fuck are we talking about?
We're talking about this movie Lust Caution this week, man. On Ben's recommendation. He really wanted to cover it.
Yeah, there's a story to that, but I also sort of like that this is the end of our foreign language spy trilogy for the year 2007. We watched Lives of Others.
Yeah.
We watched Black Book, and now we've got Lust Caution. We kind of close it out.
It is quite a year for these spy thrillers. It's kind of cool. And I feel like it's kind of a bit of a dead genre. I feel like now you'd get this as a Netflix show. So yeah, Lust Caution is a 2007 spy movie from Hong Kong, right?
Well, so it's directed by Ang Lee, who's a Taiwanese filmmaker. It filmed primarily in mainland China, in Shanghai, although scenes were filmed in Hong Kong as well. It stars Tony Leung, who's a Hong Kong actor, but then a lot of the other actors are from the mainland. So it's just it's a huge hodgepodge of different sections of China and the Chinese film industry and the Hollywood film industry all coming together to make this movie.
It's a true Chinese movie. Did you watch anything else this week, Ben?
I did. Yeah, I rewatched Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Which I love.
I've never seen any of those Star Trek movies, the old ones. I've only seen Honestly, dude, I've always been like, one day I'll get into Star Trek. I feel like it's really cool, niche thing to be into.
Really cool being into Star Trek.
I don't know, isn't it? Do you think I'd be more of a Star Trek guy or a Star Wars guy? Because let me tell you, I'm not that keen on Star Wars. I'll be honest.
I don't think you'd like Trek either, though. It's a little pretentious for you. I think you'd like Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I watched one episode. So I don't know if I ever mentioned this on the podcast, but I was reading my dad's old journals, my deceased father's journals. It was a very, very interesting thing to go back to when he was around my age and a little bit older. And one thing he wrote about was he watched a Next Generation episode the night that it aired in 1992 or whatever. I don't remember the name of it, but it's one of the most famous episodes. It's the one where Picard touches an asteroid and it puts him into the body of a guy who was the member of a civilization, and he lives an entire life as this other man, and there's this big twist ending where it turns out that civilization is 1,000 years dead. And my dad wrote about it and he was like, I cried when I watched this. I called all my brothers and I actually sat down and watched that episode, and it was pretty good. I didn't cry like he did. But it moved him, and I was like, man, I gotta check more of this out. I feel like it might be the kind of thing where I should maybe go to a list of the best 20 episodes. It's not really necessary to sit down and watch every single episode from 7 different TV series and maybe 2 of the movies.
Sure.
Is that a good idea?
I think so. I honestly think that as a film lover, the film series is worth watching, and you don't need to have seen any of the TV shows to watch them.
Okay, that's cool.
They were my introduction to Star Trek. Just since I'm sure there's somebody out there who's screaming for us to recognize it. I believe that episode is called The Inner Light.
Yes, The Inner Light. And it was really good. It was
it's a classic.
Very cool. It reminded me of a great sci-fi short story.
It's sort of Twilight Zone-esque, just a really nice self-contained
totally
sci-fi premise. So, but Wrath of Khan, not Next Generation, it's original crew. It is, I think, the best standalone Star Trek movie. Like, you really don't need to have seen any other Star Trek to watch that movie. It's just great. It was written and directed by Nicholas Meyer, who was a professor at Chapman while we were there.
Oh, cool. Love that. I watched La Strada, the Fellini movie.
Oh, I love La Strada.
It was very good. It's a 5-star movie. I will say, I think it may have affected my viewing of this movie, Lust Caution, that we're going to talk about. Because I watched La Strada, I watched this terrible piece of shit man abuse a woman for 2 hours in Italian, Fellini, amazing. It asks a lot of you, that movie. It asks you to sympathize with said man who is a really irredeemable person, but yet the movie ends on him, and it ends being like, look at this guy. He's feeling really bad about what he's done. And, you know, it kind of tosses the woman in the garbage a little bit. And then I sat down the next day to watch this movie. And
Very similar trajectory.
very similar trajectory. So
Just an hour longer.
I might have been a little, like, tapped out by the end of this Lust Caution movie. So, yeah, I'm on a Fellini kick of sorts, and it's been good to me. Speaking of being good to me, listeners.
That was a hell of a transition right there. What a segue.
Thank you. Please, if you can, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Even if you don't listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, if you could just download that podcast app on your iPhone and just give us that 5-star review, we'd be really appreciative. We have a new 5-star review. It's from my cousin, Lorraine.
Nice.
The fiance of Barrett, who's been on this show a couple times. And I'm going to read her review really quick. She said, "This podcast is amazing. Nat and Ben's deep dives into each year of cinema are fascinating. If you haven't seen the movie of the week, Nat's summary will get you caught up. Great premise, hilarious host, and really interesting facts. A perfect mix." So
Thanks,
thank you,
Lorraine.
Lorraine. Thank you so much. It means a lot. Please help us out. Give us a 5-star review. If you're a new listener, if you enjoy this podcast, we'll remind you at the end too, but please give us that 5-star review. And we promise we're going to talk about Lust Caution in a moment.
You're all on pins and needles.
Well, I'm imagining like someone watching this movie that can't find a lot of coverage of it online because it's not a popular movie. No one cares, especially English-speaking people, except for Benjamin Hain. And they find that there's this amazing podcast about Lust Caution. If that is you, please give us a 5-star review because we are about to go deep on this movie.
To be fair, if you like Lust Caution, then you like slow builds.
That is true. We're also on socials, BttM Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So with that, let's get into Ang Lee's Lust Caution.
We got to start with the story minute.
Oh, yeah.
You ready to do this, Nat? There's a lot of plot in this movie.
Yeah, I can do it. Well, it's based on a 98-page book, so I feel like I can do it.
Do you have a title for your story section this week?
Yeah, it's Story Fast.
Story, fast.
Yeah.
Great.
Story Fast.
Can I just say, I love it when a movie title uses like an unexpected piece of punctuation, like a comma.
It's a cool title.
You know, punctuation's underutilized in titles.
Yeah, you have a lot of colons.
Few M dashes.
Couple fun exclamation point movies.
I love an exclamation point.
Yeah.
A lot of apostrophes. What about
Well,
quotation marks?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm looking over at my my DVD collection to see if I can find any good ones. Ooh, I have a good one. I mean, this doesn't really count, but Bruno has an umlaut over the
great.
U,
Sure.
which is kind of cool. I can't find any others.
Anyway, I'm glad this minor observation turned into a 30-second segment here.
Yeah, of course.
Let's get into story, fast, where Nat recounts the story of Lust Caution fast. You have 1 minute. On the count of 3, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. A woman in World War II China gets drafted into a sect of drama students / wannabe assassins. They're going to assassinate a traitor who's working with the Japanese who are occupying. They attempt to have her seduce him, but it all goes wrong. They end up killing a different guy, and they all kind of, break up. Years later, the same group that tried to assassinate this guy tracks her down, re-recruits her for a round 2 of trying to kill this traitor guy. and her and the traitor enter into a very, very toxic relationship. She gets to a point where she's gonna kill him, but at the last minute, she fucks it up. She fucks up the whole mission, and she doesn't do it, and they all die, and the traitor gets away. The end.
That's time.
That's it.
Woo! That was good. There's a lot of plot in this movie.
I had to push it really fast at the end there.
Yeah, I like that you also had some of the passion of it, though. You know, it wasn't just a recap. There was some emotion to it.
Well, can I tell you what I thought of this movie?
Tell me what you thought of this movie.
This movie was good. It's a good movie. But I am a broken man, Ben. You broke me. This movie's so depressing in a way that another movie, La Strada, which we've already established is a very similar vibe, a similar relationship at the core, is not. I can handle depression. What I can't handle is 2.5 hours of relentless, hopeless depression.
With just one of the bleakest endings of all time.
One of the bleakest endings of all time. We have to put it up front that, yeah, this movie, it's like very well crafted. It's obviously slow going at the start, and I gotta say, I wasn't a huge fan of the framing device. It just made it longer than it already was, and I didn't feel like it really needed it. I don't know. And also coming off of Black Book, it's tough because Black Book, I feel like there's a spectrum of satisfaction with these movies.
Sure.
I think Lives of Others is probably the most satisfying because you have a literal fascist turn over to the quote unquote good side, and he, ends up assisting the good guys. And then you have Black Book, which has its fair share of misery, but isn't all bad.
But has visceral thrills. And
has visceral thrills, but
note.
All the bad guys get their just desserts, and the main character doesn't die. And then you have this movie where the main character spends 2.5 hours building to this mission. There's only one purpose of all of this, and she willingly fucks it up in the very end, and everyone dies except for the bad guy.
Leading to her death and the death of all of her friends.
Yeah. It's just a lot to handle. It's a lot. And I'm hurt. I'm hurt inside after watching it.
Isn't that, I feel you, but isn't that pain like something special that a movie can make you hurt?
Yeah, and again, La Strada. It's a terribly sad movie, but there's also joy there. There's a clown at the center of La Strada, and there's no clowning around in this movie. I mean, we haven't even mentioned that this movie is rated NC-17, which blew me away. It blew me away when I saw that in the Apple rental. I was like, holy shit. And then the funniest part about it being NC-17 is that there's nothing NC-17 until about 1:10 into the movie.
So I was going to talk about this at the end. They sold this movie so hard on its explicit sexual content. And there's maybe 5 minutes of it in the movie.
Yeah, it is more intense sex in a movie than most movies. Like, it goes the extra mile. And it's effective. And, obviously the sexual assault scenes are horrifying. It's truly terrible. I was kind of like, man, did this need to be NC-17? I don't know.
Well, they released an R-rated cut of it later in the US, but they sold it as like the R-rated cut you didn't see in theaters, as if it was like an unrated cut, like a sexier version of it.
I mean, honestly, dude, I really feel for the people that had to market this movie because it's just like, it's so relentlessly depressing. But it's also funny because it's not like one of those art house movies that you expect to be relentlessly depressing. It has all of the dressings of a movie that's like gonna give you just like entertainment. It seems like another Black Book or another World War II drama, but it's not. It's so much worse, and there's no hope. Even Schindler's List, which includes like Holocaust and like people getting fucking shot in the face for no reason, like it has more hope than this movie.
They have that play at the beginning of the movie that goes over pretty well.
That play is depressing. That play made me sad. And it's, you know what it is? It's like the movie makes you so depressed, but you don't realize that you're depressed until like the last half hour. or even the last like 10 minutes.
Because you don't realize that there's no hope. Because
Yeah,
the movie
exactly.
snatches hope from you right at the end.
At
You
the
think
very end.
the suffering will have been worth it.
Exactly, because you expect a lot of bad things to happen, but you also expect something good to happen, and nothing good happens in this. So that brings me to my overall point, which is that I know that this movie is based on a 98-page novella, and I think I would much rather read that novella than watch this movie. I think that would be the ideal way for me to consume this type of story. I love a good depressing as fuck novella, because a novella you can walk away from and it doesn't last very long.
You could probably read the novella in less time than it took you to watch this movie.
Exactly. You're not depressing yourself for 600 pages, and you are also able to just use your own imagination to let the story happen. But to be a captive audience and watch this movie that like a master filmmaker makes, and he uses like everything in his cinematic power to be like, oh yeah, this is just a normal movie, and then he just keeps chipping away at your soul slowly, it just killed me. So I've said my piece, Ben.
Yes. And listeners, I'm sure if anyone's still listening who hasn't seen the movie is just dying to go see it. But I'm going to speak up in defense of this movie. I find this movie achingly beautiful. I find it so powerful and so compelling. And I could not disagree more with the idea that it would be better as a novella, because the single greatest strength that this movie has is Ang Lee's filmmaking. This is a master filmmaker at the top of his form, executing so well all of the tools at his disposal in the mise-en-scène of the film, in blocking, in gesture, in production design, in set design, in cinematography, all of it employed so carefully, with such a keen eye to detail. I have honestly never seen the like.
Dude, but what I'm saying is that I agree with everything you just said. It's just so fucking painful to watch this movie. And it's awful. It's a terrible experience. It's going
to sound weird, but the joy that I took out of the movie was the joy of watching Ang Lee's mastery of the form.
Right, and he's using it to tell this terribly depressing story. And I just can't get behind that.
Very bleak. It's very bleak.
I
like bleak stories, so that was part of why. So the story about why we're covering this movie, by the way, Nat sent me an email earlier today being like, cool, man, Ben, you got to keep it in check. I believe the word you used earlier was obsessed with this movie.
Yes.
But Nat, the truth is, I only saw this movie for the first time a month ago.
I mean, we were going to do this. We were going to do a triple episode of this, Lives of Others, and Black Book. But we decided against it. But then you watched it and you were like, you pulled your trump card and you were like, we're covering
this. I originally was just going to talk about it in the Black Book episode, just because those two movies have so many similarities. They're both about female spies during World War II in occupied countries who have to seduce agents of the enemy. You know, right. They're sexually explicit, like they're by major prominent Hollywood directors who have now gone back to their countries of origin to make these movies. There's so many interesting similarities between those two movies that I wanted to make sure to talk about both of them. And when I sat down to watch it for that episode, I was unprepared for how staggered I would be by what Lee was able to accomplish with this film.
That is interesting. I had no idea you hadn't seen it until you watched it that time.
Yeah, I knew of it. I remember when it came out. I mostly remember it being NC-17 and people making a big deal about that. You know, here was the guy who directed Crouching Tiger and Brokeback Mountain making this NC-17 spy thriller. But then never saw it then, never really got around to seeing it, even though I really love Ang Lee's films. And this was just my first opportunity, and I was not disappointed.
Yeah, I have to temper everything I say with, like, I still respect filmmaking here. It's just like, I was so crushed at the end of the movie.
It is, I mean, just skip ahead to the very end. That moment when she tells him to run is just one of the most brutal dagger twists of a filmic moment ever.
I would say that of these three, because now essentially it's now a series where we're talking about these three movies. I'd say that, yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, but it's just, it fucking hurt me, man. It fucking hurt me. So,
see, I like it when my movies hurt me a little bit. You know, I mean, because and like something like Lives of Others is going for a similar ending, at least at the end of whatever the operation is, where he's spying on the playwright and then the actress dies. You know, it's supposed to be this kind of bleak ending, but it doesn't land with half of the power that this one does.
Lives of Others is a Disney movie compared to this. Are you kidding me?
That's what I'm talking about.
Lives of Others has like communism fall. The guy gets out of his shitty job in the mailroom and he fucking gets a book dedicated to him.
Yeah.
He gets so validated in everything that he did. Whereas this movie literally ends with every character you like getting shot in
taken
a
out to a quarry and then getting shot off screen.
Yeah, man. Have you ever seen Son of Saul? The Hungarian
I did not, though I
Holocaust
really
movie?
wanted to see that film when it came out.
Dude, that movie is so fucking depressing, and yet Lust Caution was more depressing. Because it's like, it's gonna be bad in that movie.
It's about the
Everyone is doomed. Even something like La Strada, they're fucking doomed. But this movie, the whole time you think they're gonna pull something off. This would be like if Ocean's 11 ended with like the FBI killing
Danny
Daniel
getting
Ocean.
shot by mobsters
Yeah.
and the rest of them being arrested.
Or all of them being killed. If Benedict kidnapped all of them and shot them in a hole in the desert.
Including Julia Roberts, and then he felt a little bit bad about killing Julia Roberts.
Right, exactly. That's what this movie is, and that's why this movie is more crushing than almost any Holocaust movie, any war crime movie. It's just so fucked. So anyway, let's move on.
Let's get into the book report corner.
The book report corner, for the love of God.
I want to talk about three people. You mentioned this book was based off a novella. It was a novella by an author, a Chinese author named Eileen Chang. She was very famous in China. The most interesting thing about her writing this novella, which she published in the late 70s, is that it was at least partially based off her own experiences during World War II. She married a collaborator with the Japanese, a man who was labeled a traitor after the Japanese left.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's a whole world I don't know much about, that Japan occupied China or parts of China. It was kind of like a slow creep. They were just kind of taking over various sections of China, which is so crazy to me.
So Chang writes this novella. She bases it partially off her own experiences and then also partially off of the life of a real-life Chinese spy who was executed after failing to assassinate the security chief of the Japanese puppet government, which is basically the plot of this movie.
Right.
The novella comes to the attention of Ang Lee, the director of the film, and the person I really want to focus on because he's just one of these filmmakers I dearly, dearly love. His filmography is so eclectic, but he imbues all of his work with so much dignity and so much empathy that, like, even when his movies are bad, I still love them.
He really is your ultimate fucking filmmaker. He really is.
He's up there. He's up there.
He's just so up your alley. It's ridiculous.
I love a movie that's interested in details. And like the famous stories about Ang Lee directing is like, he will go in and he will micro position somebody's body language. And he'll be like, okay, your head needs to be at this angle and looking this way. And like, he's so in tune to just like the shapes on screen and the way that people interact with each other and communicate non-verbally. It's just so beautiful.
But also just from what I've seen of his, like, yeah, I feel like it's a really good cross-section for you, Ben. It's like people that are hurt and just living pained existences, but it's all well shot and there's some excitement.
And he often combines them with genres I like. You know, he makes a kung fu movie, he makes a Western, he makes a superhero film.
I like a lot of his movies. Of what I've seen, I've liked all of them, I think. More or less.
He's born in Taiwan, which I think is a really important fact when it comes to this movie, for two reasons. One, when he's born in 1954, Taiwan is under martial law. And during a prolonged period, basically like 40 years of martial law, where Taiwan was controlled by the military. And so obviously that sense of military occupation and military control pervades this film in a very palpable way. And the other interesting sort of context about Taiwan related to this film is the 2000s saw this major renewed focus on Taiwan's independence from China.
Right.
And Taiwan effectively became an occupied state within the country.
Have you watched a lot of those Taiwanese movies? Like the Edward Yang films and stuff like that? They're very good. That whole new Taiwanese cinema is pretty sweet. And very similar to this movie. It's all very bleak and fucked.
I mean, their country has had to grapple with a lot of challenging history in the 20th century that is clearly informing this film. Sometimes in subtext, sometimes in some pretty rebellious ways. This movie was mostly financed by Chinese filmmakers, was a huge hit in China, but ran afoul of Chinese censorship because of some of the ways it depicted the Chinese during the war.
Yeah, you got some traitors in the mix in this one.
Yeah. So after being born in Taiwan, Lee moves to the US. He attends NYU. He's in the same graduate class as Spike Lee, which is a fun fact. They work on each other's thesis films. He makes a couple Chinese language films, and then in 1995 he makes Sense and Sensibility. Have you ever seen that one with Emma Thompson?
That's a good one. That's a
really good. Yeah.
Good movie that I wouldn't normally like, I think. But he just pulls it off beautifully. He's like the perfect director for that.
The performances are so good. Alan Rickman, so wonderful in that movie.
You know what it is? He freshens up what could be a really stale type of movie. Like a Jane Austen, British theater movie, basically. And he makes it work.
And he doesn't do it by like adding a whole bunch of overt style to it. It's a very pastoral movie. It's very gentle.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to talk about his 2000s though, because his 3 films preceding this in the 2000s are Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Hulk, the Eric Bana Hulk movie, and Brokeback Mountain.
Man, I didn't even know he directed Crouching Tiger. That's awesome.
Which I rewatched after watching this the first time a few weeks ago. That's a top 25 movie for me. That movie is just incredible.
I gotta rewatch that. Where's that streaming? Is that streaming anywhere? Or did you?
I don't know. I got my DVD.
Oh, nice.
Physical media, baby.
Yeah, that's cool. I've never seen Hulk, and I watched Brokeback for the first time a couple years ago, and I loved it. Couldn't believe it lost to Crash. What a joke.
It's one of the most embarrassing Oscar moments in history.
Yeah, that's a really good movie.
But anyway, it's such a fascinating 2000s. 2 massive critical hits in Crouching Tiger and Brokeback, which were Oscar frontrunners, both of them in the years that they were released. He wins at least 1 Best Directing Oscar, I believe. He's won 2 at this point, which puts him in a pretty short list. There's only about 20 filmmakers that have won 2 or more Best Directing Oscars, and he's one of them.
But now he's doing those weird frame rate movies. What the fuck is that about?
He went really deep. He made Life of Pi, and after that, he's like, I'm never making a movie that's not in 3D again.
Man.
But he's a trailblazer. He's shaping the technology so that future generations of filmmakers can make use of it.
Did you see Billy Lynn's halftime walk? That looked insane.
By all accounts,
really insane.
If you were able to go to one of the 2 theaters where they were playing it in 148 frames per second, it was like mind-boggling. But if you went anywhere else, it was incomprehensibly bad.
It seems like that would be like the equivalent of walking into a theater with like a huge TV that has motion scanning on. Like that setting that they just have on every TV. I know. And like whenever I walk into someone's house, I feel like I need to perform an exorcism. I'm like, you have motion smoothing on? Yeah. And I'm like, we're shutting this off. And I'm like, how do you not realize that this is happening? Don't you remember watching shit in like 2007 and what it looked like? It didn't look like this. And people are just like, what? And I'm like, the power of Christ compels you.
Have you ever seen a high frame rate movie? Did you see any of the Hobbit movies?
If I saw the Hobbit. I think
that's the first one. That's the only one I've seen.
I might have seen Hobbit in 48.
Yeah.
I can't remember, which clearly means that it didn't matter because that movie sucked.
I remember how weird it looked in 48.
Yeah, it looks like motion smoothing. It looks like
you can also you can see the artifice is the problem. You can see the makeup. You can see the lines of the wigs. You can see the costumes. You can see the sets. You lose that veneer of unreality.
Yeah, I don't think that or 3D is the way. I think there's another way that we haven't.
It's called VR.
I mean, maybe that's the way. I don't know. If you could look around.
Has Ang Lee made a VR movie yet? I'm sure he will at some point if they let him. All right, one other person we got to talk about before we get into the movie, James Schamus. James Schamus is Ang Lee's secret sauce.
I don't like you expressing someone's role as someone's secret sauce. That's really gross. And you should never do it again.
He's the secret ingredient. James Schamus was the writer and producer on a lot of Ang Lee's early films. And there is a noticeable trend after Schamus stops working with Lee, his movies have not been as good.
He's just a tech guy. He's not.
They were one of the greatest pairings of director and writer in Hollywood history, in my opinion, which is not a pairing people talk about very often. You talk about director and cinematographer, you talk about director and actor, but they very rarely talk about a director and a writer working together repeatedly. And these two were a team.
because usually it's the same person. Those are your most famous writer director combos. It's someone who
does both,
who wrote it and directed it themselves. So that's really cool. I like that.
Lee met Seamus when he was looking for a producer for his first feature. And there's this great quote where Seamus was recalling Lee walking into his office and giving him a 45-minute pitch. And he called it one of the worst professional experiences I've ever had.
Oh, God.
But nonetheless, he produced that film, and then he wrote and produced the majority of Lee's films through Taking Woodstock in the late 2000s.
Oh, I forgot about that movie. That was a decent movie. That was like a total like movie of the week. I saw that in theaters. Ang Lee directed that?
That's probably my pick for worst Lee film, but yeah, he did.
I remember a lot about it, honestly.
Well, you know what? He's a great filmmaker.
Cool. I like Ang Lee. I'd say my favorite Ang Lee has got to be Brokeback. It's a really good movie.
For me, it's Crouching Tiger.
Life of Pi didn't quite do it for me, but it was cool. I should watch Billy Lynn's. I should like do mushrooms and watch Billy Lynn's halftime walk in VR.
Great. That's really good.
All right, let's get into Lust Caution. Finally.
The movie opens in media res, but instead of being like some crazy action scene, instead of being Ratatouille with Remy jumping out the window, it's a mahjong game. And then somebody sitting in a cafe drinking coffee.
Well, yeah, you get the sense that shit's going down because she makes a phone call to these guys who all load up guns, and you're like, okay, what's happening?
Even before that, in the mahjong game, there's so much subtext happening that you don't really know what it is, but you can feel the tension. There's secret language happening in the way this game is being played.
You've watched this movie twice now. I've only watched it once, and I wonder how much more effective, because I already said that like I didn't dig this in media res. But maybe if I watched it again, which I won't be doing, I'd be more into it because I understand what's going on. It wasn't enough of an in media res to get me going. It kind of made the rest of the experience of the movie like we're just building to this moment, and I don't know. I think I would have liked it more if we had just started with the drama club.
What's funny is it reminds me so much of Black Book, which also has that, you know, that framing device. And in the prologue section, nothing really happens. And you don't really understand what the importance is. That movie's a lot more built on the tension of what's going to happen to that character. So it becomes more useful later as a way of reinforcing that tension. But it's just so interesting that both of these movies that are already so similar start with an en media res or flash forward to an event that is seemingly insignificant.
Yeah, I guess my thing with that, though, is that Black Book didn't start with the party before everything went to shit. It started with her alive years after World War II. So you're kind of like, okay, she's going to be okay. Whereas this, it just started with the right before the climax. So it kind of fucks it up for me because I'm waiting to catch up to that moment in the climax, the whole movie. But Mahjong looks cool. I want to learn how to play Mahjong.
There's this thing that Lee does where he's like very clearly paralleling the challenge of maneuvering through social space with the challenge of being a spy. You know, it's like there's so much social pressure in the way that this game is played that is communicated very clearly in the body language of the characters, in their tones of voices and what they say, that it does give you the sense where it's like any wrong step could ruin you, either because it will reveal that you're a spy or because you will make some kind of social faux pas. There's several very interesting parallels he draws in this movie, and that's one of them.
I think I would be a really bad spy. I would not be cut out for it. I can't remember people's names when they introduce themselves to me. I'm really bad at like kidding around with people. Like when I'm like trying to joke with them, they like see me smiling and they're like, "You're full of shit." I would be so bad at being a spy. I would so much rather be like, if I had to choose, I'd rather be like a Marine. I'd rather have to sneak in somewhere in the middle of the night than have to like pretend to be someone else. I would suck at it. Do you think you'd be a good spy?
No, I'm very uncomfortable lying. I'm not good at lying.
See, I'm like the opposite. Like I don't mind messing with people, like kidding around and like tricking them, but I just get too excited. I'm like, yeah, it's working. And then they see me smile, and then the jig is up, and I'm fucking executed in a ditch outside of Shanghai. So we go back to this girl. You see, it's this girl who is this big time spy. But then we cut back 5 years, and she's a like kind of down and out provincial chick, right? She's like sitting in a truck, and there's soldiers marching off to war.
They're refugees fleeing the Japanese occupation.
Yeah, she's clearly not this high society woman that she was pretending to be in the first scenes. She's just a girl in the back of a truck.
So this actress who plays the character's name is Wang Chi. The actress name is Tang Wei. This was like her first film role.
Wow. She does a great job.
She's incredible in this movie.
Yeah, once again, it's like Black Book, the whole movie is her.
Yeah.
It's crazy. She's commanding the screen.
And like Black Book, she's playing kind of a range of characters that are the different parts of this person. And she does them all excellently.
Yeah.
The sad thing is, because of the sexually explicit nature of the performance, she was blacklisted in China for years after this film came out. She could not get work.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of sex in this movie, and it's not easy to watch. But it's also like not titillating at all. It's the least sexy sex I've ever seen in a movie.
It's all about violence and power and not at all about like sexual pleasure.
Even Black Book was like sexy.
Yeah, it's because Verhoeven's really, he's a little sleazy. He's a
sleazeball. But this movie was not at all. And it's funny because I'm sure that like the way they marketed it and the NC-17 rating made people be like, oh, I gotta go see this porno movie, and then it's this most depressing movie of all time.
So Wang Chi and her fellow students take up residence at the Hong Kong University, and they put on a play to show support for the Chinese resisting the Japanese occupation. It's a very depressing play about a soldier who dies and drives his mother insane and his sister to tears. What do you think of this scene?
Besides the death and destruction, I think the worst part of being in a war and starvation and all the things you'd already think of, the worst part of being in a war would be having to sit through propaganda all the time. I think that would really suck to just constantly have to sit through the shittiest plays ever written that are just shitty propaganda. And then to have your movie interrupted by propaganda.
Well, that one's tough there at the end.
It would just get so annoying. I would be so pissed.
This play so fascinating because Lee is making this movie at the height of the Iraq War. He is a U.S. citizen at this point. He was naturalized as a U.S. citizen, did most of his professional work in Hollywood. And like, here's a very short section of the movie that's very much about the kind of art that people make during wartime. And I don't know exactly how he feels about it because he doesn't condemn these students or their play. The play looks pretty good and it's very moving to its audience.
I thought the play looked awful. It looked like shit.
The audience seems to like it.
The audience is wrapped up in nationalist fervor, just like the people in the show that literally march down the streets skipping and being like, "We're gonna beat the Japanese. We're gonna beat the like." They're all ravenous warmongers.
Did it look better or worse than the play in Lives of Others?
It looked way worse because the play in Lives of Others had the wrong director.
Sure.
They switched it. They show it twice with two different directors, and the second director clearly gets it more. This play was just straight up like some old school World War II, just total bullshit.
Well, you know what this play was, to continue on with my Iraq War metaphor? This play was Transformers. This play was 300.
Those are at least cloaked in other
You're
stories.
right. This is not cloaked.
This is straight up like if they had just made like an Iraq War movie, which they did.
They were almost always critical of the Iraq War, though.
Ang Lee made it. Billy Lynn, right? Is that an Iraq War
That might
movie?
be Afghanistan.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I gotta watch that movie. Maybe that should be our next season, so we can include it.
Let's include Billy Lynn.
It sounds like a trip. I think it looked like a terrible play.
I'll tell you what's not terrible in this section of the movie: the score. I love the score to this movie so much.
Yeah, it's a good score. I wasn't really taking it in, but then I listened to it a little bit on Spotify when I saw you put it in the show notes, and I was like, oh yeah, this is really good.
it's really stirring and lush and simple. It's Alexandre Desplat, a famous French composer who was just starting to break into Hollywood in 2007.
Yeah, he did the score for The Queen, which I really like a lot. It's a great score.
And that's 2006, and it's his first Oscar nomination. So that's right before this.
He's definitely gotten me a couple times. After I saw a movie, I'd be like, oh, I want to check out the score. And then I'm like, oh, it's that guy. I really liked his score for this movie called A Better Life, which is this weird bicycle thieves remake about a Mexican migrant worker in LA who gets his truck stolen. And Desplat did the score. It's the best part of the movie. And I remember like listening to the score, and it was really good. He's a good composer.
I find it very moving as it's deployed in this movie, and it's not deployed often. He saves it for some key moments. So this group of students, they decide that they have to take things to the next step, which means murdering a collaborator.
Yeah.
They made their patriotic play. Now they have to kill somebody.
It's so insane. Ben, you've done a lot of like local theater. Have you guys ever like plotted to do some diplomatic assassinations?
I'll just say this, that like theater people can be dramatic, go figure. And most of the weirdest situations in my life have involved being with theater people. So it's not outside the realm of possibility.
It was really funny in this movie. It's like a Glee episode. Like, guys, what if we murdered?
They're in the balcony of the theater.
Guys, oh my God, what if we killed for political purposes? Yes.
They were already, doing radical activity. They made a overtly political play. Like they were already politicized. They weren't, just like, they weren't the Glee Club. They were making propaganda. They were part of the system of opposition.
That is true. Just take it to that next step,
But it is still funny when the director, Kwang, says to his group of students, now we have to kill somebody. That's the next step. The play was good. People liked it. The next thing we should do is kill a person.
We have to kill. It's time to kill.
And the person in question is a man named Mr. Yi, who is the head of the security for the collaborationist government, the puppet government in China, played by Tony Leung.
He's really good. He's a great actor. Tell me if I'm wrong. Does he look exactly like Barack Obama to you? He is Obama.
He's Chinese Obama?
He's not even Chinese Obama. He's just straight up Obama. If you squint your eyes, he looks exactly like Obama.
There is, I think, some similarity there. I'm not willing to say exactly like.
It distracted me so much. No, it's not exactly. It's probably like a 78%. He looks so much like Barack Obama. It's crazy. He's got different hair, but oh my God, he should play Obama. It's uncanny to me. It's like, it's so close. It's like when they do Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill or something, and you're like, oh, in that shot, he just did it. Like, that was Churchill. But then other shots, you're like, no, that wasn't it. But like this guy, Tony Leung, he got it like 80% of the time. And it was really bad because in the movie, he turns out to be this monster rapist.
I'm going to have to watch the movie for a third time now just to confirm this. The thought never crossed my mind.
So much like Obama. He's got the same exact eyes. It's insane. And I actually, during the movie, I squinted my eyes and I was like, yeah, that's Obama. There he is. It was crazy. But in terms of the actor, very good. Very good.
He's such an interesting actor in the US because he has been in a lot of films that have had success here. Movies like Hard Boiled, Hero, Infernal Affairs, all of his work with Wong Kar-wai. But he has never appeared in a Hollywood film.
Oh, that's interesting.
His debut Hollywood film will be Shang-Chi, Marvel's Shang-Chi, coming out later this year.
Gotta get that Marvel money. The cash cow. I will say this, he does not look like Obama in any of those other movies. It was just this movie.
Just this one.
I don't remember him looking like Obama in Hard Boiled or Infernal Affairs.
I specifically want to call out In the Mood for Love. Have you seen that movie, the Wong Kar-wai movie?
I have. I didn't like it very much. I was bored out of my gourd.
It's another movie about repressed sexual desire and slowly building tension.
I feel like the whole movie was just two people like in a hallway being like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Like they're just like, it's like, just fuck already. It's a movie. Just fuck.
Great. I can't wait to edit this and cut around you slamming the table.
Sorry.
But anyway, I just think that's a really interesting contrast to have Lung in both of those films playing such different versions of the man in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
He's horrifying in this movie.
He really is. It's a slow burn. The first few hours of this 12-hour movie, you think like he's a bureaucrat. You don't really get a sense of like what he's doing or who he is. But then they get together. Even it's not even like the first encounter, the first year of what their relationship, like you never see the true monster that he is. It's only after she comes back later that you really see. He's really like, he doesn't make a move on her in the first half of the romance. So it's really crazy when he pops up all of a sudden and he's this fucking...
The first rape scene, the first scene where he rapes her is very frightening and very upsetting. All the more so because he has been so restrained this entire film and then just reveals himself in all of his violence and sadism.
Yeah, he's got a lot of demons.
The one thing I will say about this character, though, is that he's not just like a pure sociopath or pure psychopath. Ang Lee is very interested in his emotional core, is very empathetic towards this terrible person, and the movie forces you to reckon with it.
Again, another parallel to La Strada. It's another
True.
movie where it's asking you to reckon with this person who, by all measures, is not a good person. But it's still being like, hey, get a look inside this person's mind and maybe try to look at it from a different angle than just like, this is a bad guy.
And like you said up top, both movies put some measure of the heartbreak of their conclusion on the emotional effect it has on this man, on this monstrous man.
The one thing that I was satisfied with this movie was that I looked up the true story that it's allegedly based on, and the guy that it's based on did get executed in like 1947. So you can take that away from the depression of this movie. And like, yeah, this guy deserves to be fucking executed. He's terrible.
He absolutely does. He's done really horrible things.
Yeah.
He tells us so.
Yeah, and he's obviously taking it out on her, that he's being forced into these fucked up situations. Like, I don't think he's the type of sadist that like relishes the destruction and terrible things he's doing, but it's like, it's almost like the fact that he's been forced into it has made him more of a monster than he would have been otherwise.
He's just been poisoned by the circumstances of his life. He clearly lusts for power and must have always done so, or else he never would have taken this position in the first place.
Right.
And almost always, like as we see in his sexual encounters, power is his primary objective in those.
Yeah.
But then it has been amplified and worsened by the fact that he is surrounded by people who want to kill him all the time.
Yeah.
So you can't trust anyone.
Yeah, it's not fun to be in World War II. That's what I've learned from these movies. It just fucking sucks.
So Wang Chi begins her attempt to infiltrate Mr. Yi's household and to seduce him. She plays up as a rich woman. We get just these absolutely stunning costumes and sets of these beautiful apartments and these incredible dresses. I just have to talk about these dresses. I'm not normally like a costume person, but they're stunning. Everyone in this movie looks so good. Tony Leung in his suits, he looks so good.
Yeah, people are looking fresh. That Shanghai cut.
People don't dress like that anymore.
Oh, you're wearing a graphic tee right
That's
now.
what I'm talking about. I'm wearing an Amity Island Police Department t-shirt. What the fuck am I doing?
Be the change you wish to see in the world, man.
The infiltration goes disastrously wrong when, before they can act on it, Mr. Yi is restationed and moves out of Hong Kong.
It's a big fuck up because she actually takes lessons in how to have sex, and then he leaves, so she doesn't even need to have sex with him anymore. And it's just the first disappointment of many in Lust Caution.
Her friends pressure her into practicing having sex with one of the other students in the theater group in scenes that are very upsetting to watch because of how upset everyone is who's partaking in it, including the other student.
They're just like, the students are such idiots. They like are so in over their head. They don't know how to do espionage at all. They're all just hanging out at the apartment that they rented to pretend it's her place, waiting for this guy to come back. And then like when they're on their way back, they're all just like fucking around and have to rush so that they're not out in the open when they come home. They just don't know what they're doing.
They're a bunch of kids playing at being spies.
But they're like very close to killing this guy. They almost get the job done.
Only because of Wang Chi, though. She's the only one who's any good at this.
Yeah. For someone who doesn't want to be a spy, she's pretty good at doing it.
So I want to talk about the sex stuff a little bit. I mean, just because it's so central to this film's legacy, it was sold very heavily on it. And even though there isn't that much explicit sex in the movie, there is some. There's several scenes. The movie is very much about sex. Like, in a way that I've seen very few movies be this much about sex. It's about the physical elements of sex. It's about the emotional elements. It's about the psychological elements of sex. Not about romance, about sex.
Yes, and?
That
You're just going to toss that to me? You're just going to be like, yes,
Okay.
it is, Ben.
Interesting facts about it. According to Ang Lee, it took 100 days to film the various sex scenes in the movie. That is twice the length of many films' complete shooting schedules, just for the sex scenes.
That's kind of crazy. I guess he had a really specific vision for what they were supposed to look like.
And I mean, I'm sure they were incredibly difficult for the actors. A lot of them are very acrobatic. Must have been really demanding and exhausting, but they're also so vulnerable. You know, they're so raw.
They are,
so
and I think
charged.
it does add a lot to the overall emotional experience at the end, because you've really seen everything that she's gone through. And
Yeah.
it just makes it all the more gut-wrenching at the very end when she screws the pooch, so to speak. But also, it's just tough. It's tough to get through because it's not sexy at all.
I mean, you talked about it. The moment when they learn that Yi is moving away and that she has gone through this act of debasing herself or sacrificing her virginity, or however you want to phrase it, for nothing, effectively, is so heartbreaking. The costs are so personal for her that she has to pay.
Yeah. And I do think that the sex scenes that come later, which are the reason that this movie's NC-17, because those first sex scenes are not.
They're
that
mostly
explicit,
undercovers, yeah.
but it gets pretty sexual later on. I think I saw some balls
Yes,
in there.
yeah. There's some balls. There's plenty of butts.
Yeah, there's a little bit of everything. Yeah, it has that cumulative effect by the end of the movie where you're just like, man, she went through a lot of shit with this fucking asshole, and it just didn't pay off at all. I can't believe you watched it twice, to be honest.
I like I said, I find it achingly beautiful. I was deeply moved by this movie. I expect I will watch it many more times in my life.
It's weird to say, but like if those sex scenes weren't there, I don't think the ending would hit as hard.
So it's very interesting that you say that, because we already mentioned this film's slightly troubled response in China. The explicit treatment of sex caused tremendous controversy in China. The film was heavily censored before it was screened on the mainland. All of the sex scenes were cut, including the two with the student, which are barely explicit. But other things were changed too. Most importantly, the dialogue in the very final scene was modified so that she doesn't betray the resistance group.
That's just stupid. Because, like,
That's the whole movie.
what? Well, yeah, it's the whole movie. So what? He just has spider sense.
Yeah, they just
He's like,
round him up.
something doesn't feel right about this. What I think is really silly about that, and for all I know, that the Chinese censors are listening to me right now and are plotting my untimely death or something.
Our podcast will never play in China.
Isn't it like more patriotic in a way to say that like there are members of our country that aren't strong enough to handle this? You know what I mean? Like, what are we trying to do here? If not just tell a story about human beings. It's like, yeah, we have human beings that fuck up in our country. But I guess the whole point of having like a single party system is that the party is the strongest thing and no member of the party can fuck up. So you can't just have movies going out willy-nilly saying like, oh no, there are individuals that are weak.
And the movie doesn't want you to aspire to be like Wang Chi. You know, her moment of weakness causes tremendous suffering.
No, of course, it's just a human story. You know, she's a human being and she has conflicted emotions about what's happening. It seems silly to me to not let that be a story.
Yes, I agree.
Like, what are you going to ban fairy tales? Like, half the fairy tales have bad endings too.
It does seem ironic that censorship often seems to target that art which is best positioned to better the human race.
Or just like provide some insight into the human race.
Right.
But you can't be weak. That's the whole thing. Like, it's so
revolution
cliche.
could never be betrayed. The resistance can never be betrayed.
Whatever. Fuck it.
So then, as Mr. Yi leaves, their contact that initially allowed them to infiltrate Yi's household comes a calling and confronts the students, having realized that they are not who they said they were. And we get this very upsetting murder sequence.
If you ever are going to confront like a group of 6 people, I think you got to immediately take your gun out and be like, everybody back up.
Start shooting.
No, don't start shooting. But just like, I was thinking about it last night. I was like, man, if I had to confront like 6 people, I'm not letting them get within like 2 arms lengths of me. If I have a gun and they don't. It seemed like a really bad plan on this guy's part, but he fucked it up. This is just a movie of fuck ups over and over again.
And then the costs paid for fucking up.
Yeah.
You never get off easy.
Except for the main bad guy, who we should have seen get executed in 1947.
This sequence,
it's fucked. It's crazy.
All the details, the clumsiness, the knife slipping and cutting the guy's hand, the use of handheld camera here. It's like the first time in the movie that Ang Lee has used a handheld camera, and it's so effective.
Yeah, what it made me think of is like how easy / hard it is to kill somebody. Because in La Strada, Zampano just punches a guy once and he dies. And then this 6 people can barely manage to kill this guy. So the human body is such a remarkable piece of machinery.
The other thing that's really interesting, I don't know if you picked up on this, this is the only act of violence we actually see in the movie. We see dead bodies.
Well, other than
we hear people talking about it.
Sexual violence.
Other than the sexual violence. Yeah, you're right. That's a really important distinction. No, but I mean, I wanted to make that distinction where it's like, we hear Mr. Yi talk about the terrible things that he has done to people, but we don't see it. The only terrible thing that we see someone do physically to another person involving, murder, again, making that distinction, are the students killing this guy in a very upsetting way. They all stab him and none of them has the skill or the will to finish the job.
Yeah, this is a Hitman video game society where not everyone is just murdering every single day on their PlayStation, so they really don't know what they're doing.
You think you'd be better suited to this because you've played enough GTA?
I don't want to put myself on a pedestal here, but I don't know.
If I was in an improvised student resistance group, I would be better at killing people.
I'm just saying that like they've only watched like 40s movies. They don't know. They haven't
watching Cary Grant be very charming.
Yeah, they haven't seen what I've seen, man.
They haven't seen Less Caution.
This is so fucked up. But yeah,
they were living through World War II, but that's not relevant.
Okay, you're right. Who am I to say? Yeah, it's bad. It's a bad vibe. Again, very effective, and also contributes to the mood of just utter hopelessness and defeat. Like, you can't even kill a guy right.
This scene felt very Black Book to me, and like sort of how it kind of spirals out of control. It's that classic Verhoeven calamity, except on a smaller, more intimate scale.
Verhoeven always makes it fun, though, no matter what. You're so excited. And Ang Lee is like, no, it's bad.
Ang Lee's like, this wasn't fun. This was horrific. Everyone involved felt really bad about it.
Exactly. So you got to make that distinction.
What happens next?
Well, next up is that I don't know any of their names. The main character, she 4 years later finds herself in Shanghai, and the resistance tracks her down and are like, yo, we never finished the job.
The real resistance.
But it's the same guy. It's the same guy that she was working with before. But yes, he's now working for a more legit guy. They're better funded. They're more legit now. They're more
better trained.
And they say, listen, we're going to have you come back into Obama's life, and
let's not call him Obama.
Sorry. We're gonna have you get back into his life, and you're gonna get him this time. We're gonna finish the job.
There's lots of little details here that I love. I love where she's like being forced to learn Japanese in school, and the propaganda interrupting the movie that she is watching. This is just something that Americans have never had to reckon with. Since America was a country, we have never been occupied, with the exception of like the War of 1812, which barely counts. This idea of like being forced to assimilate into a new culture is just, I find that very compelling and very alien to my personal experience or to my historical experience. Ang Lee employs it very texturally. This isn't a movie about, cultural assimilation. It isn't really about occupation. It's about collaboration, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
We barely see any Japanese soldiers. We barely see like get any sense of what the Japanese are actually doing. Mr. Yi is the antagonist and he's Chinese.
So yeah, she gets with him again. They enter a relationship, and this is when we have the real deal sexual violence. It's he puts on a nice face, but then she finally is alone with him and he just really goes crazy on her. He rapes her, and it's shown. The whole thing is shown from beginning to end. It gives this movie an NC-17 rating.
It's made all the worse because she is bound by her mission too, where she's like forced to endure it in a way that exceeds even, the threat of violence and the physical control. There's a psychological component where she has to just internalize it so that she can keep doing the job that she's supposed to be doing. It's very upsetting.
It's horrible.
It also makes, I don't know how you felt about this, it makes the ending of this movie really challenging. Her moment of humanity or her change of heart towards him is hard to grapple with, given what we see him put her through.
Yeah, that's why I am now depressed, Ben, because I watched this movie on your recommendation.
Well, I kind of thought you might come in being like, I didn't buy it, it's a pretty tired trope, the like, he has sex with her so good she falls in love with him, but I don't actually think that's what this movie is doing. I've heard that criticism of the movie.
Oh, absolutely not. I didn't get that sense at all. That she loved him. I just got the sense that she's a fucking slave to him.
She even says as much.
Yeah, she says, I'm a slave to him. So when you're a slave, you end up betraying yourself because you have no self-worth anymore.
He needs to control every part of her.
And he does, ultimately. And any part of her that isn't controlled by him is controlled by the resistance. So she has no agency in her whole life.
I love that scene where she spells it out to old Wu, the resistance leader. Because that scene starts with Wu and then Kwang, the old director of the theater group who's now in the resistance, talking about her with her in the room and not acknowledging her at all. She has no agency there. They don't respect her as a person. She's just a tool to them.
Well, and also the scene where they burn her letters. They burn the letter that she wants to send to her father because they're like, fuck that. We don't want her to have anything.
What I love is that she confronts them with the cost that she is being asked to pay, and they can't deal with it. Old Wu freaks out. Like, he can't face what she is facing every day and is succeeding in overcoming until that one moment she can't.
They say it like, dude, she is not going to be able to handle this.
We'll have to talk about why she can't handle it in a few minutes, but we aren't quite there yet.
Now we're in the affair of the two of them, and it's just a long trotting through the muck of this terrible affair where he tells her to meet him somewhere, and then they have terrible sex, and then she has to go play mahjong with his stupid ass wife. Just over and over again. It's terrible.
I want to talk about one scene in particular. I want to talk about the Japanese restaurant.
Oh, yeah, the Japanese restaurant.
Because the nature of their relationship isn't static. It changes. It becomes clear that his original hatefulness towards her was born out of mistrust. We learn that there were other honeypots. There were other agents sent by the resistance to try and seduce him. He says explicitly, like, there's been a long time since he's ever believed anything anyone has told him. But that starts to change. He does start to trust her and starts to have feelings for her in whatever way he's capable of having feelings. And that comes to a head in the scene where he takes her to a Japanese restaurant and she sings him a song. And Yi begins to cry.
Yeah.
What do you think of this scene?
I'll be honest, like, this was at the point in the movie where I was like, this movie is too fucking long. This movie should be 2 hours.
This is Lives of Others, listening to Sonata for a Good Man on the headphones.
Lives of Others clocked in at 2 hours, I think.
I got you. I'm just talking about what this scene like is doing. I really like this scene.
That he's sad. He's a sad boy.
Well, the question is, why is he sad and why should we care? And I think Lee has answers to those questions.
Yeah, he's sad because he knows that he's a fucking traitor to his country and that he chose his own luxury over being loyal and getting shot. It's pretty simple when you break it down. It's like he chose life over death. And that means betraying anyone that would have any respect for him.
And the scene does have a very deliberate contrast between the Japanese music, which he detests, and then this Chinese song.
Right.
So there is the sense of like longing for his culture, even though he is a collaborator of the Japanese. But I think there's more to it than that too, because when he talks about the Japanese music, he says basically that they know they're going to lose, that they know that once America entered the war, they could not win. So that means he knows he's going to lose. So there's a sense of his own oncoming mortality. But the content of the song is also really interesting because it's about this very pure fairy tale love between these two perfect soulmates.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of what's getting to him too, because that's something that I believe this character desires, yet is clearly incapable of. His heart has been so badly poisoned by his actions that he could never achieve anything like that. And there's a sense of acknowledgement of that.
Yeah, this is where I get to I wish I was reading this, because I can handle this in text. I cannot handle it when it's an actual human being.
Well, let's get to the end of the movie
Let's end this movie. He finally is like, okay, she's cool. And he buys her a ring. 6 carats.
The ultimate symbol of a romantic relationship fulfilled. A diamond ring.
That is a rock. That is quite the rock. My
also
God.
A great callback to like one of the earliest Mahjong scenes when his wife talks about wanting to have a diamond bought for her and he refused to buy it for her.
Yeah, he gets her this ring. There's a really funny fake out where she thinks she's going to do like a spy thing, but then it turns out that he's just a weirdo and had her go on this wild goose chase to get a ring for her. But then she picks the big rock and she tells her boys, this is it. He's gonna be at the diamond store. Kill him there. He comes. The plan is going perfectly. And then she looks at the ring. She looks at him. And she just tells him, get out of here. Go. Go now. And he, being the smart little piece of shit that he is, knows to book it.
Dude, his reaction to when she says that, like that split second of realization, so good. Lung's performance there is amazing.
He's like an animal. He's like a little rat. And he busts out the door. The guys that were going to kill him are like, whoa, what the fuck? And he tells his chauffeur, open the door, open the goddamn door, as he's running to the car. And then he dives. He does a swan dive into that like 40s automobile. I don't think you'd be able to do that with like a Honda in 2021.
You hit the armrests.
Yeah. But he's able to do a perfect triple Lindy dive into the back seat of the, whatever car that was. I want to say it was like a Volkswagen or something. And he gets the fuck out of there. Like,
this scene is so good. Talking about Lee being a master of details, particularly in the way that people react to things. There's so many great moments here with little looks and expressions. When the car door slams, when they first get to the jeweler shop, and Wang Chi's face, like it sounds like a gunshot to her, and the startled look on her face, and then the looks that she exchanges with the assassins, or at least with the men who are nearby who may or may not be the assassins. We don't even know for sure because she doesn't know for sure.
They looked like assassins, but I guess everyone, if you think there's assassins, everyone kind of
looks like an assassin. I want to ask you, why do you think Wang Chi warns Mr. Yi?
Because despite everything, she has a human connection with him. And she's sitting in this office. He has expressed that he doesn't trust anyone in the world. He's finally showing her the affection that she somewhat has been seeking out in her spy life. And she realizes, like, this guy actually likes me. It would be very upsetting to me to see him get shot in 5 seconds. It's hard to, like, overcome that.
It's really interesting that in the sequence where they kill the man earlier in the movie, she is like the only one who doesn't participate in any way. She's outside. She is separate from the rest of the group. She's on the balcony while they murder him.
Yeah, she doesn't seem the type to like murder. They drag her into this from the get-go. They're like, "Are you in?" And she's like, "I guess so," to like have a sense of belonging because she's kind of an outsider. I don't know. It's more important to her that there's life than that there's death.
Yeah.
And obviously it all leads to death.
I like the expression that it's like a human moment, that it's like it's just basic humanity to not want to see another person get killed.
Right.
And she's such a good person that even for someone who has abused her in the way that he has, she has that for him.
She is really good at the job, but like they said it earlier in the movie, she is not cut out for this. She is not a soldier. She's a normal person. She's not a killer. She's an actor. She likes to act. That's why she's good at what she's doing, because she's an actor. She likes being on stage. She likes pretending. But like, in order to be a spy, you have to be an actor and a killer. You have to have both of those skill sets. And she just does not have the killer skill set. So she's not qualified. And it leads to her entire cell being killed because they chose the wrong person.
Twice in the movie, Kwang, the director of the theater group, who's part of the cell, says that, like when you're in the room with the collaborator, with the traitor who has caused the death of these many people, it will be easy to kill them. And what I love about this moment is it's the inverse of that. It's this idea that when you are holding the gun, it will never be easy to kill them, no matter who they are.
Yeah, it's sort of like a more discreet version of like that thing you've seen in every movie where there's somebody holding a gun to someone and they're like, "You're not gonna shoot me, you little shit."
Just done with so much more empathy and humanity and subtlety and beauty. And it wrecks me. And then we get our denouement where they're all rounded up and killed. And we get this absolutely devastating reveal, which is that the secret police knew the whole time. And they only hadn't told Mr. Yi because they thought maybe he had turned.
That didn't get me as hard as the execution where they're all just looking at her.
I guess the moral of that is that even if they had killed Yi, they all would have died.
Oh, right. They would have been
rounded up the next day because the secret police already knew all about them. They hadn't succeeded at anything.
Right. Yeah, they would have died.
The only thing that they had succeeded at was Wang Chi making connection with Mr. Yi. That bond between the two of them is the only thing that they did at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. They would have all been executed anyway. That scene where they all get rounded up is super upsetting. I'm glad they didn't show them getting shot. They didn't even do the classic like pan away and shoot. They didn't even show the bullets. You don't hear the guns going off. So that was kind of nice. They spared me that little bit.
I think it's another one of Lee's strengths is he's really good at knowing when to get in and when to get out of a scene. And he often begins a scene with an ellipsis or ends it with an ellipsis with implied information that the audience actually doesn't need to see. They can just fill in the gap.
That struck me as a very short story kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they all got on their knees. ... And then that's the end of the movie or whatever, or the story. Yeah, and then it ends.
And then our final moment is Tony Leung sitting on the bed and his wife coming up to him, and they have a really great exchange where a lot of unspoken stuff is revealed.
Yeah, it's like he's like, tell your friends that she had to go home, and she knows that she's dead,
and that they were having an affair. And that her husband was almost implicated in this whole thing because they took stuff from his study.
He's a cursed man. He's going to live the rest of his hopefully short life freaked out at all times that everyone is out to get him.
The absolute best he can hope for is to live until the war ends. And even that feels like a long shot at this point.
I could see a lot of people seeing this movie and being like, what the fuck? He got away with it. And like, no, he didn't get away with it. He's screwed. Don't worry.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I don't love that because that's like, this movie's only good if the bad guy gets punished. That's a little reductive. I don't know. I don't care either way. I'm more interested in the emotional toll that this experience had on him.
I really want him to be put in prison for the rest of his life. I don't necessarily, I don't believe in capital punishment, but I believe he should be, tried and convicted for his crimes. And I don't like the guy.
Understandable. Not a good guy.
That being said, I still understand that he's a human being and that he has emotions. But fuck him. He should rot.
I mean, that's sort of Lee's whole take on the characters, right? He's like, he's a monster, but he's also a human being, and those two things exist at the same time, and that's really hard to deal with.
There's this movie called La Strada that gives you the exact same emotion, but it's like 40 minutes shorter, and it doesn't like make you want
I
to kill
thought
yourself.
we were going to spend this entire time comparing this movie to Black Book, and instead we spent comparing it to Lestrada.
I'm just saying, I didn't want to cut out my own heart after I watched Lestrada, but this one I did. Let's get to the legacy.
Box office. This film had a budget of $15 million. A nice modest budget compared to the $300 million of Pirates 3.
Which we talked about last week. Yes, it's a little bit cheaper.
It opened in the US on September 28th in one theater, and it grossed $64,000, which is actually a pretty good
I wonder
per-screen
what
average.
theater that was. I bet it was in New York.
Maybe LA.
Interesting.
It never played more than 150 screens in the US at one time. Like, this was a very limited release. I bet it never came to Vermont.
Has any NC-17 movie ever been screened in Vermont?
It's a good question. It went on to gross $4.6 million domestically, but $67 million worldwide, mostly from China.
Okay. But from that altered cut, right?
The altered cut, although the cut wasn't altered in Hong Kong or
Okay.
Taiwan, other parts of China that are a little bit more liberal.
Gotcha.
It was nominated for numerous awards. It won the Golden Lion at Venice. It swept the Taiwanese Film Awards that year. Won major awards on a lot of East Asian Film Award circuits. However, when it was submitted as Taiwan's film for the Best Foreign Language Oscar, it was disqualified and was not allowed to be submitted because not enough of the key creative participants were from Taiwan.
Oh. Yeah, that's one of the downsides of having such a international production, is that you can't. That's the weird about the Oscars, that the best foreign film is tied to a specific country. Very strange. Maybe they should change that, and also everything about the Oscars, because they're fucking broken.
But I love this movie. I would have certainly nominated. I probably would have given it the award that year. This is my favorite of the three foreign spy films that we've watched this year. Our foreign spy trilogy.
I gotta say, of the three, I think Lives of Others is still the winner. I just like that world so much. The Stasi 80s versus the just terribleness of the actual World War II. It's just too much for me.
What do you got for themes?
Themes, I see the ones you put, and I agree with most of them.
You got corrupt institutions, voyeurism, obviously a big part of this, a big part of any spy narrative. One of the other interesting parallels it draws is between, voyeurism as an act of spying and then voyeurism as like a sexual act. Early on in the film, Wang Chi does a lot of watching of Kwang, the director on whom she has a crush, in the same way that she watches Yi. There's a lot of repeated shots.
Is nationalism one of our 2007 themes? Didn't we talk about that for 300?
A little bit,
That's here a lot.
So that's interesting that you say that, because I almost feel like this film is subversively anti-nationalist.
Well, no, just the fact that there is nationalism at
sure.
all. I feel like we've seen that a little bit in our other 2007 movies.
The last one that I had that hasn't been super prevalent, just because it's kind of a hard thing to incorporate in a lot of movies, is collaboration, which was also in Black Book, where you had people discussing, working with the Nazis and some actually conspiring with them. But it was also in 300 with the Hunchback, who collaborates with Xerxes' army. And I just think in the midst of a war, an unpopular war, it's very interesting to see these films talking about what it means to work with the enemy, to compromise with the enemy, what the differences are between that.
We'll have to see if it comes up again. Yeah, man, I'm glad I watched Lust Caution. I'm broken now, like I said before.
So do I get no more trump cards? Is that the rule?
Well, I put you through Good Luck Chuck, but
Yeah, it's true.
But honestly, I think we're probably equally hurt by those two movies. So I think we're even. I think we're even.
I broke your heart with a beautiful piece of art. You broke my soul with a horrific act of commercialism. Yeah, those are basically the same.
I have a couple that I forced coming up anyway, so I'm satiated, I think.
We gotta start keeping score.
We're good. You think I'm not keeping score? What crazy? So that concludes our discussion on Lust Caution. Hope you enjoyed it, and please come back. If you're a first-time listener, check us out. We have a lot of good discussions on a very wide spectrum of movies. So give us a follow on your podcast platform. Give us a follow on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok at BttM Pod. You can also email us bttmpod@gmail.com, and you can also follow us on Letterboxd. I'm Nat McGee, NATMAGEE, and Ben is Hain101. I write a lot of reviews on there. You can follow me, check me out. If you've never used Letterboxd before, it's an awesome platform, and we love it. So, yeah, the only other thing I want to ask of you is to please give us that 5-star review, if you can.
Yeah, give us something to read on the show next week.
Yeah.
Speaking of next week, we will be covering the film Juno. Oh, that 2007 hit, Juno.
Juno. We're coming back to the big hits.
Home skillet.
Oh, God. For Back to the Movies, this has been Nat.
And I'm Ben. And we'll see you next week when we go back to the movies. What's the most uplifting movie to watch after watching a very...
What's the most satisfying
Pee-wee.
World War
Pee-wee's
II?
Big Adventure.
No, but what's the most satisfying World War II movie where they just completely fuck them up and nobody dies other than bad guys?
It's probably Glorious Bastards because they literally kill Hitler.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think I will watch it.